Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Johns Hopkins School of Education, Master of Science in Education, Digital Age Learning and Educational Technology, also known as DALET, virtual webinar. My name is Sion John. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions.
And I am Tyrene Maddox, the Admissions Coordinator for School of Education.
Also presenting today, we have Dr. James Diamond, Professor and Program Lead, and we also have Alicia Keys Harris, graduate of the DALET program.
Before we get started, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. First, today's webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. Also, please take this time to make sure that your mic is on mute and that your video is off. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please type your question in the chat box and Dr. Diamond and I will read and answer your questions at the end.
Next, I would like to share the agenda for today's virtual webinar. We will kick off the presentation sharing an overview of the Johns Hopkins School of Education. Then Dr. Diamond will introduce himself and discuss and go over the details of the DALET program. In addition, Alicia will also speak about her experience in the DALET program. Lastly, I'll wrap it up with admissions requirements, go over financial aid, and lastly, leave the floor open for questions at the end. Again, please keep in mind to type your questions in the chat box at the end of the presentation.
To start, here's some quick facts about JHU School of Education. We are one of 9 schools at Johns Hopkins University. We began offering college courses for teachers in 1909 and then became our own school in 2007. We are proud to share that the Johns Hopkins School of Education is consistently ranked one of the top schools in education by the U.S. News and World Report. SOE has collaborative partnerships with Urban Teachers Programs and Teach for America.
For school enrollment, we have approximately 2,465 enrolled students. We have over 30 plus graduate programs, which includes doctoral, master's, and graduate certificate. We have approximately 121 full-time faculty members and a strong network of 22,000 SOE alums. At this time, I am going to hand the floor over to Dr. Diamond. He is going to introduce himself and present on the DALET program.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. As Sion mentioned, I'm Jim Diamond. I'm the faculty lead for the Digital Age Learning and Educational Technology program. That's me. And there are a few bullet points about me, which you can certainly read anytime you like. I'll just give you a little bit of background on me. I am relatively new on faculty in the School of Education. I'm here for 2 years. I worked for many years before that as a research scientist in a nonprofit research and development organization called the Education Development Center. And for most of my career, my scholarship is focused on the area of digital game-based learning in K-12 education. So most of my research has been around trying to understand how classroom educators use technology, trying to understand how they learn to use technology, and then trying to develop technologies that are useful for them and K-12 students. Okay, next slide, please. So before I give you a program overview, which I'll do, I promise, so I want to say I'm very excited to have you. I'm excited that you are interested in our program. I'm glad that you're taking the time to join us to learn more about us. I'm also very excited that Alicia Keys Harris is joining us. She's currently a student in the DALET program. She's getting ready to graduate. And I think she will be a terrific source of information for you now and potentially in the future if she's willing, not to put her on the spot. So I am going to talk for a few minutes about the program, and then I'll hand it over to Alicia, and she'll talk a bit about her experience. and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. And, also before I get going to talk about the program, just to state the obvious, I would say that this is one of the most exciting and fraught times that I can imagine, and certainly in my career, in which to be pursuing graduate studies in the field of educational technology. So ed tech, likely, as you know, has been an important subfield of education for a long time, but you could say that right now we are currently witnessing in real time the necessity of having practitioners and leaders who are well prepared to apply their knowledge and skills to think creatively in order to design and implement educational tools and environments with the goal of achieving equitable outcomes for all our learners, and irrespective of the industry or whether the learners are children or adults. There are every day I am reminded of how many questions there are that we are asking, right? So to pick one obvious area for questions about online learning, right? So we have questions about what it means for children to be learning online. We have questions about what it means for adults to be learning online. We've been asking these questions for a long time. But suddenly there's a great deal more attention being paid to it, I think. What does it mean for people to learn online? What does it mean for people to be learning online from home? What does it mean for children and adults to be learning in blended situations that will now potentially involve aspects of online education and aspects of face-to-face environments and bringing those together? All of these situations call for educators who are prepared to do their work well and in those spaces. So, again, it's an exciting time to be in this field, but I also think it is a very challenging time. There are many concerns, and we hear about these every day. Who among our students and communities has access to the technology resources that are needed, like hardware and internet access? And these aren't new questions, right? These aren't new concerns. These have been with us for a long time. But again, they are suddenly all the more pressing as we're contemplating sort of a massive systemic, if not societal, migration to some different modalities of learning. There are concerns about student privacy. There are concerns about powerful interests such as big tech and their role in influencing technology adoption at home and in the classroom, and their influence on policymakers, people who are making decisions about the use of educational technology. And so all of this leads me to conclude that we need professional problem solvers and systems thinkers who are prepared to understand the complexity of these challenges and to offer solutions. So we need practitioners who are knowledgeable in the science of learning and prepared to use technologies effectively to meet the many different needs of our many different types of learners. We need practitioners who are prepared to ask themselves about what theories, what frameworks, what data should guide their designs and implementations of instructional practices and technologies when using them in a range of settings. So all of that is to say, I think it's a great time for you to be thinking about doing a graduate work in this field. I'm excited that you're thinking about joining us and doing this work. And with that, let me tell you a little bit more about our program. So next slide, please. Okay, so DALET it's a fully online program, and we have essentially two main offerings, if you will. So one is a Master's of Science in Education degree, which is a 36 credit graduate degree program involving 12 courses. Among those are a student's capstone graduate experience. And we also offer the graduate certificate leadership in technology integration, which is a 15 credit graduate certificate. So that involves a subset of courses. All of our students in the program are taking those same courses. Most of our students in the degree program finish in about 2 years, sometimes a little over 2 years. Our certificate students typically finish up in about a year, and that's spring, summer, and fall terms, right? So most of our students, I would say in the degree and certificate programs, are taking 2 courses a term, and hence you'll have certificate students finishing up in a year and degree students finishing up in 2 years or a little bit over. Next, please. Okay, so who is DALET for? And I think you can see this is at least a representation of who I think this program is for. So K-16, meaning not just K-12 educators, but instructors and indeed administrators in higher education as well, school leaders, both at the level of the school and district, people who are educational technologists in the K-12 space, but in the very broad field and industries beyond the K-12 space. Higher ed professionals, people who work as instructional technologists and instructional designers in the higher ed space. Organizational leaders, some of our students are serving in leadership roles in publishing, in media development, in nonprofit organizations. Some of our students go on to become consultants in the K-12 space and in the corporate space, and certainly, and perhaps increasingly so, people who are working or thinking about working in the online education space. Next, please. Okay, so DALET currently comprises 73 students. That's about right, plus or minus 5, I would say. The vast majority of whom are part-time, and what that typically means for us, as I was saying, is 2 courses a semester. On occasion, we do allow students to take 3 courses a semester, depending on what they have going on, but most of our students are taking 2 courses a term. 50 females, 23 males, and the average age, that's just about right, mid-30s, let's say, for our students. Next slide, please. Our students, this is the current student body. I would have to imagine that the program at some point has probably had students from most of the 50 states and any number of countries around the world. This happens to be where several of our students are from at the moment. So China, Brazil, South Korea, Japan. I think we currently have a student or students in Pakistan, perhaps a student or students in Saudi Arabia, if I'm remembering correctly. So our students really are all around the globe, and probably, as many of you know right now, in a range of time zones. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you know, the program is completely online. It is delivered via a learning management system with which you might be familiar, called Blackboard. The courses entail any number of modalities. So this includes video lectures, video mini lectures, interactive student activities, and that can mean a wide range of things. Those can be technology-based interactive activities. They can be collaborations among groups of students, which I would call interactive activities. Discussions, individual and collaborative projects, and a combination of asynchronous and synchronous sessions. So the program as a whole is an asynchronous online learning program, right? So what does that mean? You don't have to be somewhere every Tuesday at a particular time in order to be present for a live class. Depending on the course, and probably in most courses, you will periodically have instructors calling for live synchronous sessions, right? It's a good thing to do. It's good for people to have opportunities to meet and interact in real time. And in fact, you wind up doing quite a bit of that outside of your formal classroom structure, right? So all of our courses have some level of student collaboration on projects, and you will wind up doing a fair amount of live communicating with one another.
For questions. So our very first question is actually for Alicia. Hi, Alicia. I really appreciate your advice. What inspired you to transition from a classroom teacher to an instructional designer? Do you believe the program equipped you enough to make that transition? Currently, I'm a rising senior in college majoring in French secondary education, yet I'm very interested in this field.
Okay, thank you for your question, Valerie. No, is that Valerie? Yeah. Well, first of all, I've been teaching for 10 years, so that was fun. And I also have 5 children, so I was like, okay, I want to have some less kid time. That was a lot of the reason I decided to go to instructional design. And when we had that interview with the instructional designer, and it really, I was able to still be able to do what I love most about it, which is working with teachers, because I love teachers. I thought, I'm like, hey, this is something that's exciting for me, and I really appreciate an excellent lesson plan. So this is something up that alley. I hope I answered your question.
The next question we have for from Suzanne is, are there specific deadlines for application? Suzanne, this program is rolling admissions for fall, summer, and spring. The next question we have from Stephanie is, hi, will the master's degree be equivalent to one that is earned face-to-face?
So that's a really interesting question, and I'll answer that based on what I think you're asking, but I'd be curious to know more. So to clarify, in the School of Ed at Hopkins, there is no equivalent face-to-face program. But what I think you're asking is the overall student experience in an online program, is it similar to a student's experience in a face-to-face program? And here's what might be an unsatisfactory answer. I think the answer is yes and no. So is the quality of the education that you will receive through a program like this as high as the quality of an education that you would receive in a face-to-face program? I will say the answer is unquestionably yes. And I'm biased, but I happen to think this is a particularly high quality program. The differences between something like an online program and a face-to-face program are in some ways obvious, right? So working asynchronously, working at a distance, not necessarily being in the same physical space as other learners is a very different learning experience, for sure. And there's a couple of things I really like about this question. One of them is it reminds me that for people who have not experienced online education, it's a transition, right? So when you are used to all of your primary and secondary, perhaps you're used to all of your primary and secondary education face-to-face, and then you come into a space in which you are not seeing the same people weekly, which you are not seeing the instructor live, real-time, weekly. It is a real transition. It requires a level of self-regulation and time management that I think differs from what is expected. Well, that's not fair. I think it differs in the sense that there is more of a need on a student's end in an online education program to be attentive to things like deadlines, to be attentive to things like when you need to be in communication with others. Those cues are there more proximally when you're in the same space with others, right? And they are not there. You need to be reminded of them in different ways online. Otherwise, the content is, I think, you know, except where we stand out in certain places, I think that it is the same as what you would see in a face-to-face program. Certainly the rigor and the quality of the work that we are expecting of our learners is the same. I would argue that in good online education, there's actually a higher level of interactivity than there can be in traditional face-to-face learning, because I don't think that the methods that are used in the classroom are always as innovative in what you see in online. Obviously, that's not universally true. But I do think you have different modalities in online education that you don't have in face-to-face experiences that on the whole, I tend to think of as very beneficial. And that said, you know, there's a whole conversation for us to have about differences between online and face-to-face education. And I haven't figured them all out yet, thankfully. I hope that answers the question.
All right, so the next question we have is, does the program provide you a foundation to become an instructional designer?
Yes, it does. However, it is not a graduate degree in instructional design, right? So that's an important difference, and this is a good question. So if you are somebody who is really interested in becoming a professional instructional designer, there are, as you likely know, graduate degree programs that are very focused on instructional design. You will be taking instructional design courses in the program, but it's not the exclusive focus of the program, if that makes sense. So most of our students are generalists in the sense that they are educational technologists. We do have students, I think I had 2 students who graduated last year who went on to become professional instructional designers, one in the adult ed space, one in the K-12 space. So yes, you are certainly being prepared, but it is not an exclusive preparation. And and incidentally, I would be happy to talk at length about that if you like. I can't remember who asked this question, but just send me an email, and if you'd like, we can spend some time talking about it, because it's a very good question and important for you to be thinking about as you're thinking about graduate work in this area.
So the next question we have is, can you talk a little more about tightening the sequence of the program? Why is that happening, and what options are going to be less available?
Another good question. So what I mean by tightening, which is probably not a great word to use, but as I'm here, I am becoming more interested in having students take certain courses as foundation courses. And what do I mean by that? So right now, technology and the science of learning is the foundation course, right? So that means that we think that the curriculum of that course covers a body of knowledge and set of practices that should inform everything that comes after, right? So this is the foundational knowledge. This is the foundational theoretical knowledge that we think students should be coming out of their first term with. When I say tightening, what I mean is that it's not, in a program like this, it's not just about a body of knowledge, right? But it's about how to apply that body of knowledge, right? So this is a very applied field, and it's a very applied program. So we want our students to understand theories from the science of learning. We want our students to be versed in the literature such that they know what the findings from that literature have to say. But then we want them to be able to apply that through design. So the courses that I'm thinking about moving up in the sequence are more design focused courses, right? So for example, this fall, we have a new course coming in that's called Fundamentals of Design Thinking. To my way of thinking, design thinking is another foundational area that our students should be well versed in, right? Our students should be design thinkers across all of their courses and indeed professionally when they're done with us. So I want to move a course like that earlier into the sequence such that, again, it's a part of the foundation and students are coming away from that course and applying that in everything that comes after, as opposed to leaving something like that into the, until the end, right? So what is potentially being lost is that flexibility, right? You're not losing any opportunity to take classes, incidentally. What you would lose is the opportunity to take all of the classes you would like earlier on in the sequence. After the foundational courses are done, then you have the opportunity to take those electives.
So the next question we have is, to follow up, will the physical degree indicate that the degree was completed online?
No, I don't think so. Does it, Sion? I don't think it makes any distinction, does it?
No, it would just say the program name.
Yeah.
Mhm. And what is the maximum number of courses that one can take?
I imagine in a semester is the question, right? The most we will ever allow a student to take in a semester is 3. I may have allowed somebody to take 4 once. I generally don't think it's a good idea. It's a lot of work. If you are in a situation you may not be working, then we can talk about taking 3 courses. I don't have anybody do it in the first year. But in theory, you could take as many as 4. There's a better chance you'd be able to take as many as 3 in a term, if that's what the question is getting at, maximum number of courses in a term.
Next question we have is, do prospective students like myself from Zambia have a chance applying for scholarships? To answer your question, in order to apply for our grants and scholarships, you would have to be a permanent resident or a U.S. citizen. There is a website that we usually refer our international students to get more information regards to scholarships. And I can type that in the chat box. And one question I just received is, on average, how many hours should I expect as a DALET student? I plan on working full-time and going to school part-time.
So how many hours should you expect to commit to your coursework, right? I take that's the question. This is always a tough question to answer, but I typically tell students that they should expect to spend a minimum of 4 hours a week on a course, and it's more likely that you would spend somewhere between 4 and 6 hours a week on a course, between your readings and your assignments and any other associated activities.
I just wanted to chime in here, if you don't mind. Yeah, the 4 to 6 is a good range, and it seems like almost there was a balance between the 2 courses that I take at a time, so that it wouldn't be too much in a week's time. So yeah, I would definitely say the 4 to 6 a week per course.
Question from Stephanie: how did you find working in groups online? And that is to Alicia.
Working in groups for the first time online and from Abu Dhabi, it was very interesting. But the foundational course that we took, which is what is this? I can't even remember. It's the first one, but we took, it just gave us a lot of resources for how we could collaborate online. And so by the time I got to group work with the students, I had already learned what tools I could use to make it easier, how I can keep track of the project. So it took some getting used to, but after that first project was nailed out, and also my professors also considered the fact that we're in different places, and so there isn't a whole lot of requirements that we do work together at the same time, because for the most part, I was 8 hours ahead of all of my classmates for the majority of this program. So they make it really easy for you to do it. And then when you talk to your classmates, they're all working and they all have families. So everybody is all trying to get everything done with you. So after the first time, you work out the kinks, you'll know how to do it every time moving forward.
All right, it looks like we do not have any more questions. Thank you again, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Dr. Diamond and Alicia, for your time and the presentation on DALET. We look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.